Welcome to the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. Follow us on all social media and all platforms at PRConnectionsRadio.com or follow us at Sports Angle on PR. I'm your host, Ian Kelly, and on today's episode, we're bringing on Colin Lacy from Around the Bases. First time on the Sports Angle. How's it going today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing great. You know, it's postseason baseball, really the best playoff you can have, so it's great.
We were talking about it a little bit before. You said just going to talk baseball for about an hour, for you for 2 hours, but so there's nothing better. And it, even though my Braves have been eliminated for about a week now, it's still a lot of fun. Postseason baseball, there's not a whole lot better.
So speaking of your Braves, we'll talk about that later in the show. But right now, we're going to get into the American League Championship Series. You have the New York Yankees, the 27-time World Series champions, and you have the Houston Astros, made it to the World Series 2 of the past 5 years. Now, when you break down this series between Houston and New York, a lot of times people are focusing on the hitting because you have Giancarlo Stanton, have Aaron Judge on the opposite side, you have Yuri Gurriel, so much talent on the hitting side of it. But when it comes to New York versus Houston, what is something that you're looking at that could really define this series between the two?
Really and truly, and I think you kind of teed it up perfectly. Everybody talks about the hitting in New York, but I think it's going to be the pitching, and I think it's why you've seen the Astros jump out to an early lead on New York, which kind of took the whole baseball world by storm in a way. But you look at it, and we talked about it on Around the Bases last week, how Justin Verlander has come on and been the Justin Verlander back in Detroit. He's come back after a year and a half of injuries and been the Justin Verlander of old. And I think you look at the guy, he's almost 40 years old, 39 this year, and being able to do what he's done, a 175 ERA, and he's been able to be pretty healthy throughout the majority of the year. That is an extra boost to this pitching staff that Houston didn't have last year. And I think if they have it last year, you're talking about a whole different conversation of what the Houston Astros are a year ago. You have that this year. And of course, you've got Framber Valdez, you've got your Query, you've got Garcia, so many different guys in this rotation that I think the pitching is going to be the difference in this series. On the offensive side, there's so many names, 1 through 9 in these orders, that they're just going to keep trading punches. At the end of the day, the offense kind of becomes a wash, which sounds crazy between these two, but the offense kind of becomes a wash, and it's who can pitch better to keep those offenses off the board.
So you were mentioning Justin Verlander, and not only did he have a phenomenal 2022 regular season, he had a solid postseason heading into the ALCS. And when it comes to Justin Verlander, not only do I believe he is going to be a Hall of Famer by the time his career is up, but the award ceremony for MLB, that happens towards the end of the postseason as well. Do you believe Justin Verlander will be your 2022 AL Cy Young Award winner?
I think he should be. And I think he's definitely in the conversation of there's about 3 different guys that you could probably make an argument for NL Cy Young. And I mean, you look at Toronto's Alex Manoah, and he's somebody that I actually got to see at Georgia Southern when he was with West Virginia, and he was absolutely dominant for the Mountaineers. And so he's probably the best pitcher I've ever seen live calling a game. But he has come on Toronto, and Toronto has adopted him. He has adopted Toronto. He is all about Toronto. He's somebody in the conversation, but I think Verlander, just from the sheer fact of the story, becomes your AL Cy Young.
And, you know, Dylan Cease out there in Chicago, he was really someone I believe could have had some part of that AL Cy Young conversation. But I do agree with you. I believe Justin Verlander will have it at the end of the 2022 MLB season. Now, back to the ALCS conversation. Now, the hitting, the lineup, the pitching, the one aspect most people really do not factor is the bullpen. You know, when you get into your 7th, 8th, 9th inning, you have to have some bullpen. You have to have arms that you can rely on in this series. So we've only seen a small sample size so far. But in the rest of the series, what bullpen do you really believe that they could trust moving forward? Is it going to be Houston's or is it going to be New York's?
Really and truly, coming into the postseason, I might have had a different answer because if you've got Aroldis Chapman in your bullpen, and I know he hasn't been the Aroldis Chapman of old, and by old I mean 3, 4, 5 years ago, but the fact that you don't have an Aroldis Chapman, I think that really hurts your bullpen. But I give a lot of credit to the Yankees. I mean, I saw a graphic that has circulated social media. The fact that Aroldis Chapman doesn't show up to a workout going into the postseason is the reason he is suspended. He doesn't do that, but Stephen Vogt with the Oakland Athletics, the day that he was retiring from baseball, he's taking pregame blocking drills as a catcher. You can't, and I know people that have heard Around the Bases podcast know I'm the old man, get off my lawn, and the old school type deal. But you can't tell me that doesn't play a factor into a team dynamic. And so when you lose a big piece of your bullpen because of things like that, I think it gives more of a hit than just not having him in that back end of the bullpen. And not that he was the closer for this. When you've got guys like Phil Maton, Hector Neris, and Ryan Presley in the back end of the bullpen for Houston, I think those guys, and especially with the fact that Houston's starting rotation at least has the opportunity to get you deeper into a ball game than I think than Yankees do. I think that's a huge part of it, and where you only need 3, maybe 4 guys in the bullpen for Houston, whereas New York you may need 4, 5, maybe even 6 guys.
And you did mention Stephen Vaught, and I actually was doing media at the Las Vegas Aviators here in AAA Las Vegas. He was doing a rehab assignment, and his work ethic and everything was incredible. It was great getting to see him play. A few rehab assignments in Las Vegas. He was a stand-up guy. Now, getting over to the managerial part of it, because this is an aspect a lot of people seem to overlook, and that is you have Dusty Baker, longtime veteran, someone who's been part of Major League Baseball for decades. And then you have Aaron Boone, who has really been a big part of the New York Yankees, even as a player and as a manager. So when it comes to Aaron Boone, when it comes to Dusty Baker, this isn't the first time they've had to cross paths. But who would be someone that you believe can get their organization to that next level and get them to a World Series appearance?
Whenever Dusty Baker took over the Houston Astros and they went through all the change and turmoil that the Houston organization went through, I wasn't exactly sure that Dusty Baker was going to be the guy that was going to be. I thought he was going to be kind of the bridge to the next guy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But now I think Dusty Baker has kind of taken the bull by the horns and really adapted his. He's been able to have that old school feel that he's always had, but also adapt to the new era of what baseball is today. Whether you like it, love it, hate it, that's the way baseball is today. So you have to adapt in some way, shape, or form. And you've seen some managers really fall off the table because they haven't been able to adapt to it. Aaron Boone has come in, and I think he was the perfect choice to take over when Joe Girardi was no longer with the Yankees. And so being able to carry on that legacy, I think he was the perfect person to come in. He's a Yankees guy. He's a Steinbrenner guy from the old days. And so being able to carry on that legacy, but the fact that Dusty Baker has been able to merge the two of the old school and the new school, bring them together, I think that gives you so much more because he's seen so many more games from the dugout. Now, you put the two together and they may be close as to the number of games they've seen between player, manager, coach, and all the different areas. But managing as long as Dusty Baker has with the sweatbands and the toothpick coming out of his mouth, there's not a whole lot you can put up against that, especially when it comes to postseason baseball.
And, one conversation that Dusty Baker has always had, one part that's always been part of Dusty Baker has been, of course, he has never won a World Series title.
Right.
He's been in baseball for almost 50 years as a player / coach, but he has never won a World Series title. Houston, they won a title in 2017. We all know what happened in 2017. That's a well brought up conversation. Not going to go into detail there. But if the Houston Astros did indeed win in 2022, how special would it be considering Dusty Baker in his near 50 years he has been in Major League Baseball?
I think it would be awesome, not only for Dusty Baker, but for the Houston organization. And again, you can like, love, or hate the Houston organization for everything that's happened the last 5 to 10 years. But at the end of the day, to say you got past that, because, I mean, I'm not going to say it's the SMU of college football of getting the death penalty and all of that, but it was one of the stiffer penalties that Major League Baseball had handed down in recent history. And to be able to overcome that, and especially overcome it so quickly and never really fall out of prominence, the Houston Astros have been right in the thick of it pretty much the entire time. Now, you could say a year or two they were a little bit down, but you're still, at the end of the day, you're still in it. And so you're being talked about, and now you're getting to the level where you're a game, 2 games away from getting into the World Series. It doesn't get a whole lot better than that.
It definitely does not. And as much as I could love to talk about the Houston Astros and somebody who was born in Houston, Texas, I could talk about the Astros all day long. But we got to shift over to 27-time World Series champion, the team that is the iconic brand of Major League Baseball. And, the Bronx Bombers, it has been almost 14 years since they've been to a World Series title. Some people keep talking about it's been way too long since the New York Yankees have been in a World Series championship run. So Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, they struggled in a very big way against Cleveland, against Houston. They've had some home runs, but it hasn't been to the level that we saw in the regular season. So how much does Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, how much of an impact are they going to need from them in order to beat Houston and move on to the World Series?
I think you're going to have them, and then you're going to have that one guy that always seems every postseason. There's somebody that either comes off the bench at the end of the season and comes into a starting role, or just hasn't had it all year and turns it on. And you look at a guy like Anthony Rizzo. He struggled a little bit this year, 224 average throughout the year, but he's somebody that has proven throughout his career when he's hot, he's one of the best hitters in baseball. And so if you've got somebody like that, or a Joey Gallo who has struggled the last couple of years, being able to turn it on at the right time, you're going to have the guys that got you there in the Judge, Donaldson to an extent, Giancarlo Stanton. You're going to have those guys come up big for you, but also you're going to need somebody else in that lineup to produce that. Not that you're not expecting it to, but that hasn't necessarily done it up to this point, if that makes sense this year. A Joey Gallo, and Anthony Rizzo, even a Jose Trevino behind the plate. He's somebody that's had his impact on series and on games behind the plate, but at the plate hasn't necessarily done it. So you're going to have one of those guys step series if New York's going to move on.
I mean, Anthony Rizzo, you were talking about him. He was pretty much a captain of the Chicago Cubs. I mean, a leader in the locker room. So he was definitely someone that the Cubs really shouldn't have traded, but we understand why they traded literally everyone and their great-grandmother during the 2021 MLB trade deadline. Now, if you had to give a prediction for this series, if you have to say, all right, here's what's going to happen for the rest of the 2021 American League Championship Series, who do you have? Are you going to go with the Yankees or are you going to go with the Astros?
I mean, as we talk tonight, you look at Houston up 2-0. I think Houston takes this series. I think New York does get a game in this series, but I think that's all they get. I think Houston goes to the World Series, and then it's going to be a battle because we're going to talk about the NL side of it a little bit later, but the NL has kind of thrown baseball on its head in a way. But I think Houston is going to be who everybody thought they were coming into this postseason, and I think they get to the series.
And I'm actually going to go with a team that really I shouldn't be going with. Once again, born in Houston, Texas, I went and saw Astros games at the Astrodome, at Enron Field, Minute Maid Park, all of that when I was a kid. But something tells me that with the New York Yankees, they're going to find a way to turn it around. And we have seen teams come back from a 2-0 deficit, 3-1 deficit before. It's not insane to believe the Yankees could turn it around. And when it comes to their hitting, like you said, they're going to have to find someone to turn that around. So I will go with a 7-game series here. I think the New York Yankees will overcome a 2-0 deficit and they will win the 2022 ALCS and move on to the World Series. So, as we've been doing our ALCS conversation here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, I'm your host, Gene Kelly. We're here with Colin Lacy from Around the Bases. So, transitioning over to the National League Championship Series, we have two teams that if you would have betted, if you would have gone down to Caesars Sportsbook here in the sports entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada, this is a matchup nobody would have predicted, and that is the San Diego Padres and Philadelphia Phillies being in the National League Championship Series. So before we get to the matchup itself, there's been debate, there's been discussion about having a 5 versus 6 seed and how unfair a 5 versus 6 seed is. And I've been on the argument that it shouldn't matter what your seeding is. It matters who is the best two teams come playoff time. What would be your debate on that? What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you of the fact that if you have a 5 versus 6, because I mean, with the new way the postseason picture kind of looks, it's set up for what the AL has seen. It's set up for the 1 versus 2 to match up in the ALCS or the NLCS. But if you're the 5 or the 6, you have to go on the road for all 3 if you're San Diego, 2 if you're Philly, card series. You have to go on the road for those. You get those. Philly ended up having, I think I was listening to Tom McCarthy from the Phillies broadcast, and he was saying that they were on the road for 16 straight days because they had the final 9 on the road in the regular season, then 3 in Philadelphia, then having to come to Atlanta for the first 2 and travel days in between there. So you're on the road for 16 days and you still make it to the NLCS? That's unbelievable. And so you've got to win the wild card on the road and in pretty good environment. San Diego had to go to New York and Citi Field. Philly had to go to St. Louis, who's got a lot of history, and you've got 3 of maybe the best players to come through St. Louis probably going out this year. That's not an easy way to go through it. And so with Philly and San Diego with a 5-6 matchup, I'm not mad about it because, well, I'm not mad about it from a 100,000-foot view. We'll get into my Braves a little bit later. That makes me mad a little bit. But at the end of the day, if you're the 5-6 and you're playing in the NLCS, you've earned it. You've more than earned it because it is set up for the 1 and 2 to match up in the ALCS, NLCS. And if anybody else gets out of it, good for you.
So getting into the actual National League Championship Game Series, San Diego, Philadelphia, one aspect so many fans have talked about is the starting lineups and really all the talent you have in your lineup. Out there in San Diego, you have Josh Bell, Juan Soto, Manny Machado, Will Myers, for example. Then out there in Philadelphia, you have Las Vegas' own Bryce Harper. You have Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, Reyes Hoskins. So much talent on both sides. But when it comes to a starting lineup, if there was a 1 through 9 that you're going to say has an advantage in this series, who would it be and why?
That's a hard call because both of these lineups, these are 4, maybe 5 in each lineup that you're looking at possibly going to the Hall of Fame at their end of their career. And so at the end of the day, both of these lineups are just going to beat the crap out of you at the end of the day. But they both underperformed at different points in the season. Philly obviously didn't get a hot start out of the gate, got it right down the backstretch of the regular season and obviously through the postseason. San Diego struggled a couple of different times through the regular season and didn't necessarily perform to the level that you thought when you had Juan Soto, Manny Machado, Eric Hosmer, Jerickson Profar really come together. you didn't have them be that super team that everybody thought they were going to be. On paper, San Diego's probably the better lineup, but it's who's going to show up in a given day. And I think you've got it tied 1-1. They're actually playing as we speak right now with Philly up 4-2 in the seventh inning. But being able to see these two lineups go against each other has been a really good series.
It really has been a really good series, and I do like your call about 4 to 5 maybe potential Hall of Famers out there in San Diego and Philadelphia combined. Definitely Bryce Harper. Once again, this show is broadcasted in Las Vegas, Nevada, so I will give credit to Bryce Harper on that one. But transitioning over to the pitching side of it, yes, the hitting has been really good, but the pitching is one aspect that has really been overlooked, especially on the Philadelphia side. You have Zach Wheeler, you have Aaron Nola, Noah Syndergaard, him back in the playoffs for the first time in years. So when it comes to the 4-man rotation in Philadelphia and a 4-man rotation in San Diego, who would be that rotation that you trust moving forward that you could get them to a World Series title?
Again, these two rotations, you've got guys that are absolute dudes that you've seen perform at different points in their career, but they just haven't at different points in the year. You look at Zach Wheeler, a 2.82 ERA, and he absolutely shut the Braves down in his start against Atlanta in the NLDS. But there were points in the year where you were like, man, is he going to stay in this rotation? And so you're going to have them at their highest if you've got everybody 1 through 4, 5, whatever you end up going with. I think you probably got to give it to San Diego. The fact that you've got Yu Darvish, who on a quote unquote down year has a 3.10 ERA. I'd love to have a down year with a 3.10 ERA.
Absolutely.
But then you've got a guy like Joe Musgrove, who pretty much single handedly got them to the NLDS. Blake Snell has been somebody towards the back end of the rotation that has been really good for them. And even a guy like Mike Clevenger, you look at him and what he was able to do in Cleveland, he had some really good starts and really clutch situations. The numbers may not have been blowing you off the page, but when rubber met road, Mike Clevenger was somebody that was in the big games for Cleveland. And that there's a lot to be said for that when you get into postseason baseball. I don't care what your career numbers are. What are you? And again, I'm the old school guy that is you can't measure how good somebody's going to be whenever it's rubber meets road. You can't. There's not a stat that can tell you a clutch factor in a different word. And so Clevenger is somebody that I think could be a big difference in this series if it gets to that point.
And going back to the MLB trade deadline, if we had to go back in time to July, the bullpen for both teams was a huge question mark. The Phillies, so many people were saying they needed to add an extra arm. Padres, definitely people were saying that was the biggest weakness of San Diego at that point. So what do the Phillies and what do the Padres do? They fix it. They go out. They get talent. The Padres getting Josh Hader in that trade from Milwaukee. The Phillies strengthening it by getting a couple of arms on that in the trade deadline. So with the bullpen, which actually has been one of the biggest strengths for both teams, who would be a bullpen that you believe, all right, ninth inning, it's going to be a 1-run difference. What bullpen do you trust to get the job done and save the game?
I think you have to go with San Diego. The fact that Josh Hader has kind of become the Josh Hader of old. The beginning of the season, Josh Hader was, to be very blunt, Josh Hader was awful. He was absolutely terrible.
He was being atrocious. Yeah.
Right. But he's found back to what of being the reason why San Diego went out and targeted him so heavily. And so when you've got him at the back end, and then you've got guys like Taylor Rogers, Luis Garcia, even a guy like Steven Wilson, he's got just over a 3 ERA and has been really good down the back stretch for San Diego. He's somebody that I'm not going to say he's going to make a difference, but he is going to be able to get the game to a Taylor Rogers, to a Josh Hader, to these guys that are going to be able to close it out and be on SportsCenter the next day.
And one aspect of baseball, as we're having our NLCS conversation here on the Sports Angle, I'm your host, Andrew Kelly. We're here with Colin Lacy from Around the Bases. One aspect of baseball I've always said gets overlooked and not appreciated enough is who your manager is. Who is the person that is leading your organization when it matters the most? And both Philadelphia and San Diego made changes to their managers over the course of the last 12 months. Philadelphia firing Joe Girardi halfway through the year, bringing in Rob Thompson to be their manager, their bench coach, to be their guy. And then San Diego Padres doing what they did, which was bringing in Bob Melvin from Oakland, having him just travel a little bit down to California. So Bob Melvin, he's been there and done that. But people forget that the Philadelphia Phillies, their manager now, he has over 20 plus years of experience as a coach in Major League Baseball. So, what would be your X factor when it comes to the managers in this series? Bob Melvin or Rob Thompson?
I really like Bob Melvin and what he's been able to do at a couple of different stops he's had in his professional career. Really appreciate what he does in the dugout. But at the end of the day, what Rob Thompson has been able to do for this Phillies team, you look at Joe Girardi started 22 and 29 this year. Rob Thompson has taken this team to 65 and 46 as we speak right now and about to get win number 65 or 66. He is the old school, but somehow still relating. We talked about it with Dusty Baker, how he's been able to adapt. Rob Thompson doesn't necessarily adapt to what the new school of baseball is. He just makes sure his team knows where he's coming from and it works. That's what I love about Rob Thompson and being able to lead this Phillies team. And at the end of the day, he didn't have to be this great all-seeing eye for Philadelphia. He was just trying to get them through the rest of the year when that was, I think it was the first move managerial-wise that was made in Major League Baseball.
It was. It was.
And so he just had to kind of let them ride it out the last 106, 105 games. And so, but he was able to somehow get a spark in this lineup, get a spark, and being able to get them to where they are right now. I think Rob Thompson has got the upper hand.
So, getting down to the final prediction for the National League Championship Series, you have San Diego, you have Philadelphia. Who is a team that you're going to say right now, you are my pick to move on to the NLCS, get to the World Series, and like you said in the AL, so you're going to be saying the Astros, who will be facing Houston in the 2022 World Series?
This one's tough, and this one is probably one of the harder to pick, even though it looks like Philly may end up winning this game tonight to go up 2-1 over San Diego. I still think you got to go Philly in this one, though. And as much as that pains me to say, coming from Georgia and growing up in Atlanta, being a Braves fan my entire life, I think you got to go Philly just because of what they've been able to do. If San Diego is able to pull it out, it's going to be because of their starting pitching. Their starting pitching has to give them, especially the next 2, maybe even 3 games, has to give them at least 6 innings. If not, Philly's got it.
Now, I will trust the starting pitching, and I am very confident in what the San Diego Padres can do moving forward. So I'm actually going to go with San Diego here and a rematch of 1998. I have San Diego versus New York in the 2022 World Series. You have the Philadelphia Phillies versus Houston Astros, a matchup we have not seen before. So that would definitely be good for baseball. Now, since we are in the sportsbook capital of the world, I do want to mention that not only are the Houston Astros the odds-on favorite to win the World Series at minus 125, but Houston versus Philadelphia is currently the odds-on favorite to be your 2022 World Series matchup. And since I have you here on the show, if there was one team that you have to say right now is your pick to win the 2022 World Series, who would it be and why?
I hate to go with the odds-on favorite, but I think you've got to go with Houston. The fact that they've jumped out to a 2-0 lead on New York, that's a huge hole for New York to try to have to dig out of, especially having to go back to Houston if it gets that far. And I think Houston is going to dominate, if whether it's San Diego or Philly. I think both of them are very deserving of getting to the World Series, but I think if you get to that point, Houston is absolutely going to dominate. And so, for what we talked about during the AL portion of this segment of the starting pitching, Justin Verlander and all he's meant to this team, I think that Houston has got to be your odds-on favorite to win the World Series this year.
And I do want to give a shout out to all the people watching around the world, watching Sports Angle on prconnectionsradio.com, because somebody in the chat did ask this question for you, and it was, what does your guest think about the new rules being implemented to baseball next year, aka the 15-second pitch clock, larger bases, and the shift being banned?
Oh, man. We talked about it a little bit earlier that on Around the Bases, the podcast that we do with JT Crabtree and Joe McNulty, that I'm kind of known as the old man get off my lawn guy. And I'm very old school. I'm a very baseball purist. And especially coming from the umpiring world, the shift we'll get to in a second. The bigger bases, I think, is one of the dumber things to ever come through. It's not going to make any kind of difference. There's no difference that it's going to make. So that's just a change for the sake of change in my book. For the shift and the pitch clock, it's not going to be a huge difference. There's going to be a couple of guys a year that are going to get called for it. Somebody every year is going to get ejected because they're arguing it. It's going to happen. But most people, it's not going to be a factor. So that one, live with it, whatever. The shift one, I'm sorry. If you can't beat the shift, I don't care whether you put 7 guys on the right side of your infield, you got to beat it. And so if guys are not going to try to beat it, and I love what, talking about Philly, what Schwarber and Bryce Harper and a couple of guys in the Philly lineup have done of early in the postseason, you lay a bunt down the third base line. If you push a bunt down the third base line into a shift, you might get a double out of it. As crazy as that sounds, I mean, you've just got to beat what they give you. Yeah, are you trying to go up there and swing for a homer in the bottom of the ninth? Absolutely. But in the 4th inning, if they're shifting you, take the runner. And so if you're not going to take it, that's on you. Like, I'm sorry. It's, if you can't beat the shift, Major League Baseball shouldn't make the change to make it easier for you to beat what would be a shift. And the fact that you're telling people that they've got to line up, I talked about it a little bit earlier on a different show, that'd be essentially telling a DB in football he's got to line up within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage so he doesn't get beat by, like, that just sounds dumb. So, I mean, I get where they're coming from of trying to add offense to the game of baseball, but if you want to add offense, have it to where not everybody is trying to hit the ball 495 feet. Like, go back to playing the game of baseball where you're trying to get a double down the left field line to drive a guy in.
Right.
Yeah, like, have a bunt to move the runner over. That way you may be able to get him in on a single to right field and have a play at the plate. That's good baseball. I know that's going to tick a lot of people off. That's the game of baseball. This isn't a home run derby where you're trying to hit the ball 107 feet of trying to get it clear the fence and all this, but just play the game of baseball.
Now, I forget who the batter was, but it was the New York Yankees. It might have been Joey Gallo or Anthony Rizzo. I forget who it was, but everyone was on the right side of the plate, where literally the third baseman was at second base and everyone else was lined up on the right-hand side. And I sure remember yelling at the TV, "Bunt the freaking baseball," because literally everyone was lined up to the right side because that's all he does. All he does is just hit the right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was with Georgia Southern base, and their designated hitter and 4-hole hitter was Noah Ledford, who was a beast at the plate, but everybody would shift him, and most teams would take the third baseman, put him on the second base side, and their shortstop would be shaded up the middle. I told him probably 50 times through the year, like, if you push it down the third base line, you've got a double, even as slow as you are. So, like, you got to take what they give you. I mean, the old adage in baseball is what? Hit it where they ain't. They're not over there. Hit it there.
You know what? I do agree with you on that front. And actually, someone did mention on Twitter at SportsAngle on PR or hashtag SportsAngle. What about the automated umpire idea that might be going into effect not next year, but the year after in Major League Baseball? They experimented it in AAA this year. What would be your thoughts on that? If they make that a reality in 2024.
I think that would be the biggest detriment to the game that has ever come through. I mean, you've seen it a couple of times in different clips that have gone viral on social media where a pitch that has no business being called a strike is called a strike by a computer. And the problem isn't east west of inside outside of the pitch. They just haven't got the software to where north and south of high or low is as consistent as it needs to be. There's a really called Close Call Sports where it's a bunch of umpires that get together and break down ejections and different things. And if you go from different broadcast to broadcast, the K zone, the box that shows up as the strike zone, is different for everybody. And so the inside outside is the same, obviously, because you know the 17-inch plate is going to be right where it is. But everybody's knees and midpoint between the belt and the armpits are going to be different for everybody. And it's going to be different from time to at bat to at bat. And so I just don't think the software is at the point where you can rely on it 100%. I do like the fact of a couple of people have proposed to where what you've become accustomed to of normal people behind the plate calling pitches, but you have one or two challenges of where you can challenge a ball strike. So if it's a crucial part of the game, somebody rings you up on strike 3, you think it was a foot outside, you can challenge it if you want to. If you're right, you get your challenge back and it becomes a 2-2, 3-2 count, whatever. But if not, you're out of luck.
So the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, we were doing media at the AAA Las Vegas Aviators games. We did it a few times. And there actually is challenges in AAA baseball. And essentially, if you believe that the call was wrong, you can do 1 to 3 challenges during the game. And if it is called correctly, you lose it. But if it was called incorrectly, you get your challenge back. So I think that kind of would be a little bit similar to what you're talking about, where
Yeah, and I mean,
you have 3 challenges and you can challenge a ball or strike.
yeah, you've got the challenges on the different fair foul plays at the bases and different things where you can challenge it in video review now. But I don't know that ever going to an automated strike zone is what you're going to want at the end of the day, because I think you're going to have more ejections if you have a automated strike zone, because it's going to become, if I'm behind the plate and I ring you up on strike 3 because the little voice in my ear, you say one word to me, you're done. Bye. Sorry. But you'll get a little bit of relay now. And so, I'm not a fan of the automated strike zone. I think the only way to do that is have your challenges for the different plays on the bases, fair foul, whatever those calls are, and then have a different set of challenges of ball strikes.
And since we're talking about umpires for a second, people keep talking about Angel Hernandez. Everyone talks about Joe West. They all talk about the really bad umpires. But what, yet again, they never talk about is the umpires who nearly call a perfect game. Like, I've noticed that. Like, if there's an umpire who calls like a 99% near perfect game, no fan ever acknowledges it. No show or podcast ever comes out and says, hey, so-and-so had a fantastic game, only missed 1 call during the entire game. To me, I've always felt like that's kind of a lack of respect for the good MLB umpires who exist. and instead all they do is just bash Angel Hernandez for 20 minutes?
And I mean, it might be warranted, but no, there's a lot of really good umpires that Major League Baseball has. Obviously, it's the highest level of umpiring in professional baseball, and there's a lot of good umpires in these ALCS, NLCS. Dan Iasonia is a good friend of mine. He was one of my instructors at umpire school, but Major League Baseball of handling situations and being able to know what is coming up next. Ted Barrett is one of the best people in the game of baseball, of being a crew chief, being able to handle any situation. I mean, a former professional boxer, now umpire. It explains a lot. Somebody that I was not a huge fan of in years past, but he has really grown on me this year, is Alan Porter. I think he is on the NLCS, I believe,
NLCS. Yeah.
and he's made a lot of really good calls. And the thing that bothers me, we can strike until the cows come home. But the thing that bothers me is if, one, you don't know the rules, two, if you're not in position. But Alan Porter has done a really good job, especially in this postseason and throughout the regular season, of making really good calls because he's in the perfect position.
Yeah, definitely got to give props to him. Now we have to get to what I'm going to say is a fun part for you, probably not so fun, and that's talking about your Atlanta Braves for a minute, or maybe 10 minutes, depending on how long this segment goes. Now, the Atlanta Braves, they were the top seed. They were the number 2 seed. Most people, including myself, had them going up against Los Angeles Dodgers in the NLCS 1 versus 2, like it is in the American League. But yet, Atlanta came up just a bit short against Philadelphia, against a division rival. So I have to ask, what is your reaction? What is your feedback on what you saw Atlanta do against Philadelphia?
Really and truly, and this is not making excuses because I think the same thing happened to the Dodgers, and it was just the fact that New York and Houston on the other side were able to overcome it. I think the fact of having whatever it ended up being, 5 days of between the end of the regular season to the start of the NLDS, I think that was kind of detrimental to both sides of the NLDS in LA and Atlanta. Of you had just enough time to get not necessarily a little rusty, because I mean you've been doing it for what, 5 months at a time. Get out of your routine enough to make it mess with you a little bit, if that makes sense. And so being able to have that, I think that was kind of the detriment for Atlanta. Obviously, the starting pitching did not get what you needed it to, especially, I mean, you look at game one, neither starter got out of the fourth inning. Being an old school baseball guy, I'm like, well, this is not going to be a fun series. And so, and you never really got that big hit from Atlanta that you were kind of expecting, whether it be from Dansby or Austin Riley, different guys throughout that lineup. You never got that big hit in the games you needed it to. And so, I mean, there's never going to be one thing that you pin this on. And so it's kind of a combination of everything.
Now, before we continue the conversation, because there is one part I want to ask about Dansby Swanson, but there is 2 comments in the chat that I do need to address very quickly.
I hope it
Did
wasn't the
you
Go
attend the
Phillies.
AAA World Series or the AAA Championship game? Yes, the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio was at the AAA Championship game. Congrats to the Durham Bulls, who are the affiliate of Tampa Bay, for winning the AAA Championship. Thomas, longtime supporter of the Sports Angle. Go Phillies. He's probably the biggest Phillies fan I know personally. So, of course, he's in the chat. So I want to give a shout out to him. So, getting into the Dansby Swanson conversation, because, yes, he is a free agent. He really is a leader in the locker room. I've always heard about him being kind of a voice for Atlanta over the last 4 or 5 years. So, Dansby Swanson being a free agent, they have, locked up their starting pitching. Atlanta has locked up their future core for the foreseeable future. Is Dansby Swanson part of that future core, or is there a chance that there might be moving on? Is there somebody in the wings that they could use?
I would really like to say that Dansby Swanson is part of that core that gets locked up for a considerable amount of time. And really and truly, you look at it for Atlanta, this is going to be probably the biggest free agent signing, not signing, whatever ends up happening for the foreseeable future. Up until about 2025 is when the next biggest name is going to come off the board free agent wise for Atlanta. Junior, who has come on incredibly this year in his rookie season. I would be surprised if he's not in the conversation for NL Rookie of the Year. But guys like Austin Riley, and I think Austin Riley locking him up for 8, 9, 10 years, whatever it ended up being, was kind of a contradiction to the Freddie Freeman fiasco. And so I hope part of the other contradiction to the Freddie Freeman fiasco is in the next couple of weeks as things start to pick up, you start to see Dansby Swanson come off the board a little bit quicker than you may have in years past. I think part of what Atlanta baseball has been the last couple of years, being an Atlanta guy, grew up in Marietta, which is where he played high school baseball. He and I kind of grew up in high school baseball together, which is weird. He was a lot better than I was, obviously. But his high school baseball field to Truist Park is probably about 20 minutes from each other. And so, as much as Atlanta has made an impact of getting Atlanta guys back to the area, you don't want to let Atlanta guys go. You talk about it in college football recruiting a lot, being able to keep the guys in your state, in your area. Well, if you're the Atlanta Braves, you made such a huge part of this. You got to keep Dansby here.
But yeah, no, I understand that. When it comes to Dansby Swanson and the whole situation with Atlanta, I've always believed that they should really learn from the Freddie Freeman situation, because that whole fiasco with Freddie Freeman, I feel like could have been avoided. Could have not been what it was. But once again, things happen for a reason. You got Matt Olson. You have the situation now in Atlanta. But when it comes to Braves organization, if you're having to look forward and you're looking to 2023, what is one part of the offseason that Atlanta should be focusing on that will get them to be a World Series champion once again? They won in 2021, but how can they win it again in 2023 with one move?
I think you're probably looking at adding one more guy in this rotation, because I think if you have somebody like a Mike Soroka back, and he's been battling injuries for the last 2 years, if you have somebody like him, it makes a huge difference, especially in that series against Philly. But I think you need one more guy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a number one in your rotation, but you've got to have a really good number two in your rotation to add to a Kyle Wright, to add to an Ian Anderson, to a Mike Soroka that you hope is back coming up next year for Atlanta. And so I think that's probably the move that's going to be talked about a lot in this offseason for Atlanta. But I think if you're able to get a really good number two for this rotation, it would do wonders for this league.
So as we are talking about Atlanta Braves organization here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. We're here with Colin Lacy from Around the Bases. Now, you were talking about starting pitching. Would there be any pitcher in particular that you would be wanting to come join Atlanta, or would it be somebody on the veteran side, someone who's a lot older, or could it be somebody that's middle of the rotation someplace else? Like, is there anyone that you are talking about directly?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably looking at somebody, one of those veteran guys that is probably towards the last 2, 3 years of his career, but is still putting up the numbers. And so you've got to have somebody to produce, but also somebody to mentor a Kyle Wright, a Mike Soroka. When you've heard these names for the last couple of years, and so you think they're 10 years into their career, when really and truly they're still in their mid to late 20s. And so there's still a lot for them to learn. And so I think if you're able to get a veteran in that rotation, I think that does wonders. But you still have to get a vet to be your number two, maybe your number three at very least.
So I do have a name for you because I was doing research for the show. I knew we were going to be talking about it ahead of time. What if Atlanta Braves organization bring in your 2022 AL Cy Young Award winner? What if they bring in Justin Verlander to be that veteran?
I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I mean, that's somebody, and that may be overshooting a little bit of what Atlanta is going to bring in, but that would be, and it would be somebody like that that has been there, done that, has seen pretty much everything that Major League Baseball, and be able to also mentor these guys. And you're not going to get somebody that's a hothead or so full of himself that they're not going to be that clubhouse guy, quote unquote. But somebody like a Verlander who has mentored young guys before, has done it for Houston the last couple of years, especially when he was injured, and bringing up those guys in the extended spring training. And so you've got to have somebody like that. Again, I think Justin Verlander may be a little bit of a high bar to clear, but it's somebody of that ilk.
Now, this is going to be related to the NL East, but I want to mention real quick because we were talking about the off season, looking into the future for MLB after the World Series does eventually clear. And the NL East for this upcoming free agency is going to be fascinating. The New York Mets, Steve Cohen, they've already announced that they are planning on making some aggressive moves. Steve Cohen's already announced it, the owner for the New York Mets. Philadelphia Phillies, they've been busy the last couple off seasons. Washington Nationals are in full teardown mode. They're going to be selling off assets. And Miami has money to spend. So someone in the chat did mention a name from the New York Yankees. His name is Aaron Judge. You probably haven't heard of him, but his name is Aaron Judge. So I want to ask you and everyone watching around the world, as you being an Atlanta Braves fan, if he did go to the NL East, if he did sign with the New York Mets, for example, how much of a big deal would that be in terms of the shift of momentum in your division?
I know one thing that would send shockwaves around the Major League Baseball world if Aaron Judge went from one New York to the other. It'll. I would be shocked if it happens, but I've been shocked before. And so, Aaron Judge, if really and truly, if I'm the Yankees, I hand Aaron Judge a blank check and say, whatever you want, and you're staying here.
Is he
But
worth $500 million?
yes, he's worth whatever he wants. I mean, he what he has done this year alone, and the fact that you don't have to worry about pretty much anything off the field, worth whatever he wants to be.
Now, someone did say what the Atlanta Braves got him. I don't know if Atlanta would be able to make that work, though.
No, and I am of the unpopular opinion that Atlanta needs to get rid of Ronald Acuna Jr. I have not been a Ronald Acuna Jr. fan for the last couple of years. His first season, his rookie year in Atlanta, he was fantastic. He was beating out every ground ball, it seemed like, to right at people. But after that, it seemed like, and again, it seemed like all the fanfare, all the pub kind of got to him a little bit, and just not that he was lackadaisical. I mean, the last game against Philadelphia, that play in right field that Joe Simpson let him hear about, and I was 100% behind him. I think the Braves could get a lot more for Ronald Acuna Jr. than Acuna Jr. means to Atlanta, if that makes sense. You've got the guys like O'Reilly, you've got Swanson, hopefully. Michael Harris, I think, is going to be a huge part of this Atlanta team for the next decade plus. Big phrase to say. But I think the Braves could get a lot more for Ronald Acuna Jr. than he is worth to Atlanta right now. And I know that's a very unpopular opinion here in the Southeast.
So you know what? Let me add to it. All right, you are the general manager. You're double A for the Atlanta Braves. If you have to ship off Ronald Acuna Jr., who are you sending it to, and what's going to be your package deal?
You've got to get a lot back for him, whether that be a crap ton of prospects or that's a big time player right now. you've got that is going to make an immediate impact, whether it be a
Right.
prospect that is ready to make the jump to Major League Baseball, but you've got to have somebody to make an immediate impact and also benefit you down the road, whether that's prospects for down the road or draft picks.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot of possibility this off season. It's going to be a fun time. I mean, I've always pointed out that MLB off season, MLB free agency is the best free agency because the NBA, everyone gets signed after day one. NFL, everyone
Right.
signs by day two. NHL, everyone signs on July 1st and just moves on to the next one. Whereas MLB free agency, it kind of is like a month and a half long of everyone being signed and traded and dealt with. So, talking about the last 5 minutes here of the first hour here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. We're here with Colin Lacy from Around the Bases. Heading into next season, is there a team in Major League Baseball that you're watching or you think could be better next year that most people aren't watching?
Oh man, the one that kind of jumps off the page, and it's not because my wife, but the Baltimore Orioles, the noise they were able to make, and I know that sounds absolutely crazy to say the Baltimore Orioles are relevant in any way, shape, or form, but the noise they were able to make in the AL side of things the last 2 months of the regular season, especially ever since Adley Rutschman made his major league debut, and what seemed like about 15 others in their lineup made their major league debut. But you had so many young guys in that organization come up to the big leagues and got valuable experience down the stretch when they were still in the hunt for the AL wild card. I mean, you look 2, 3 games outside the wild card, those guys got valuable experiences in games that meant a lot. And those are going to be huge, I think, going forward the next couple of years. So they're one that I think can make a huge jump. Seattle is one that I think can make a huge jump. And some of the news that came out earlier today that Texas signed Bruce Bochy, and I know there's a lot of turnover in the front office and everything going on in Texas, but Bruce Bochy taking over that Texas Rangers organization, I think that is going to be huge. I don't know that it pays dividends necessarily next year immediately, but I think 2, 3 years down the road, that's going to be a Rangers team that's going to fight for that AL West.
Now, I will agree on Seattle. It's not just because I have family in Seattle, but yes, Seattle is a team that I'm going to be very high on. I believe Miami, with all the young talent and all the money that they're going to be spending this offseason, Miami could be a team to watch out for. I like Arizona. Arizona is a team that, once again, has a lot of young talent. Reno Aces were in the AAA championship game, so you got to see Arizona up close and personal. But when it comes to teams that we're watching out for, let's flip the script for a second. Is there a team that was really strong in 2022 that you believe could start to fall off in 2023?
I think it could be the New York Mets, and not just the fact that I'm an Atlanta Braves fan and hope that's the. I think the Mets had a lot more hype around them than not necessarily they deserve because they backed it up throughout most of the regular season until the last couple of weeks. But I think 101 games you're winning in New York, and I know they've come out and said they're going to make huge moves in the offseason, but they've also said that the last 4 years. And so I just don't know that they can necessarily replicate the magic in a bottle that they got this year and be able to do it for sustainable amount of time.
And I'm actually going to go with Toronto. As much as I believe they're the most entertaining team in baseball with so many fun characters out in Toronto, I just don't know how that roster is going to kind of stay together long term. So I think they could be a team that's going to fall off. Now, we have about 45 seconds left. So, Colin, shout out all the stuff that you're doing and tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, we've started Around the Bases podcast. JT Crabtree and Joe McNulty. I got to meet those guys when I was working over at Georgia Southern with the radio crew. They're with South Alabama in the Sun Belt Conference, and so got to meet those guys. Great group of folks, and being able to just kind of sit around and talk baseball for however long it ends up being throughout a couple of weeks has been a lot of fun. But you can find it on Twitter, ATB Around the Bases, ATB_show. And we'll have a new podcast coming up every week. And then outside of that, I do a couple of things for Westwood One Radio on the college football, and we'll get into baseball side, the NFL, basketball, and a lot of different things on the national radio side.
Well, Colin, I appreciate you coming on the show. You're welcome back anytime.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Now, getting into hour 2 of the Sports Angle on prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. Now, NFL Week 6, we did our picks. We went 9-5. Somehow, we went 9-5 last week on our NFL Week 6 picks. Now, it is time to get into our conversation to do our picks for 2022. And there's going to be a lot of fun that we're going to do here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. So we're going to get into it now. The first game that we're going to discuss, we have the Cincinnati Bengals playing at home, taking on the Atlanta Falcons organization. Now, Atlanta, they just came off that situation last week. Now, a lot of people, including myself, have noticed Atlanta is a team that's been building momentum in 2022. Atlanta Falcons are a team that's been steadily getting better every single week. Now, I also want to very quickly mention that Cincinnati, who currently right now is 500, just like Atlanta, they pulled off the victory against New Orleans in Week 6. So, shout out to FanDuel for giving us the odds here. Cincinnati is a 6.5-point favorite. Now, I'm going to go with Upset City here. This is going to be one of my only couple of upsets for Week 7. I have Atlanta Falcons. Give me plus 6.5 on this matchup. You know, Cincinnati could win by a field goal for all I care. But I have Atlanta. Give me plus 6.5 for Atlanta against Cincinnati. I just do not trust Cincinnati to have a 6.5-point spread in this matchup. Moving on to the next game, we have the Detroit Lions, who are 1-4 to start the year, a team that I was very high on, a team I believe could be good in 2022. Now they are 1-4 to start the season. And you have Dallas Cowboys, a team who is 4-2 on the year. Dak Prescott will be back for Week 7. So Dak Prescott starting out and bringing back his situation. So you have Dallas playing at home at AT&T Stadium. It's going to be a 6.5-point performance brought to you by FanDuel. Now, I am going to go with Detroit on this matchup, and I'm actually going to explain why I'm picking Detroit to win this matchup. Because Detroit being plus 6.5, that is not the reason why I'm picking it. The reason I'm picking it is because with Dak Prescott returning, he is not going to be as strong out of the gate. Dak Prescott is not going to be as dominant, Dak Prescott, as he normally is. All right, he's been out for 6 weeks. He's had to recover from an injury. It's going to take time for Dak Prescott to eventually become the guy that he was the last 4 or 5 years. So because of him returning and because of the wear and tear and the cobwebs he's going to have to shake off, give me Detroit plus 6.5. I could see being a field goal game. I could see it being a close affair out in Dallas, out in Jerry's world. So give me Detroit plus 6.5. Now, Indianapolis versus Tennessee. We have an AFC South versus AFC South matchup. Tennessee, according to FanDuel, is a 2.5-point favorite in this game. And Tennessee really is being carried by Derrick Henry. Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill does not look dominant. Ryan Tannehill does not look good for Tennessee. But I believe that Derrick Henry is your most dominant running back in football. Derrick Henry is the best running back in the NFL today. And we have seen Derrick Henry go out and win games all by himself, using his legs, using his ability to accelerate down the field. So I'm going to take Tennessee here. Give me Tennessee minus 2.5. I can see Tennessee winning this game and moving on to be the sole leader in the AFC South. I could see Tennessee going to 4-2, Indianapolis being around 500. And if anyone was wondering what my records will be after this week, with me having Atlanta beating Cincinnati, Cincinnati will be 3-4. Atlanta will move to 4-3. And then having Detroit pull off an upset against Dallas, Dallas will be 4-3. Detroit will be 2-4. So moving on to the next matchup, doing our NFL Week 7 picks here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. The Green Bay Packers, they're going to take on the Washington Commanders. FanDuel has Green Bay as a 4.5-point favorite, and I am actually going to agree with odds makers here. Give me Green Bay. Give me -4.5. Even though Green Bay has no receivers, really have no option for Aaron Rodgers, you still have Aaron Jones. You still have A.J. Dillon. You still have an organization that can run for Green Bay. So give me Green Bay to beat Washington. Washington will go down to 2-5. Green Bay will be 4-3 for that organization. Next matchup, Tampa Bay versus Carolina. Now, this is a huge spread, okay? This is a gigantic spread. Tampa Bay is a 13.5 favorite against Carolina. All right, 13.5 against Carolina. Now, most people will consider it a trap game. Most people will say that there is absolutely no way Tampa Bay is going to cover. Absolutely no way Tampa Bay is going to find a way to win against Carolina by 2 touchdowns. But when you remember that Robbie Anderson is no longer in Carolina, when you remember Christian McCaffrey is no longer in Carolina, when you remember DJ Moore could be on his way out, when you remember that Baker Mayfield has put up one of the worst statistics by a quarterback in 2022, and when you remember Carolina has one of the worst defenses, unlike Brian Burns, the Carolina Panthers defense is absolute abysmal. I'm going to take Tampa Bay. I will take -13.5. Give me Tampa Bay in this matchup. And I can see Tampa Bay going to 4-3 and Carolina going to 1-6 and having a top draft pick next year in 2023. Next matchup, you have New Jersey Giants taking on Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Jacksonville is a 3-point favorite in this matchup. Trevor Lawrence is going to be played at home. So I'm actually going to take the favorite here. Give me Jacksonville. I say they cover this matchup. So Jacksonville will go to 3-4, and the Giants will go to 5-2 at the end of the weekend. Moving on to an AFC North matchup, Cleveland versus Baltimore. Right now, Cleveland is a 6.5-point underdog, according to FanDuel, against Baltimore. And, you know, seeing that Baltimore has been a team that blows leads in the second half, seeing how Cleveland has an excellent running game, but they don't want to use excellent running game against their opponents, give me Baltimore -6.5. I see it being a touchdown game. So give me Baltimore -6.5. Baltimore will go to 4-3 on the year, and Cleveland will go to 2-5. The next matchup is your New York Jets taking on the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are a 1-point favorite, according to FanDuel. Even though I have no explanation as to why Denver is a 1-point favorite against New Jersey, there has been no reason, there is no explanation to why Denver should be a favorite here. The Denver Broncos should not be a favorite in any matchup with them being 2-4. And that's why I'm taking New Jersey. I will take your New Jersey Jets +1 in this matchup. So I have Denver going to 2-5. I have New Jersey going to 5-2. And New York radio stations will have a heart attack and we'll have enough topics to talk about for the next week in New York. Shout out to WFAN 66 AM, by the way. They give out excellent content that you can recite on radio shows. Now, so Jets going to 5-2, Giants being 5-2, and Buffalo being 5-1. Man, New York is on fire right now. New York has one of the best sports right now available. So got to give a shout out to New York real quick. So this next matchup is very controversial. I'm going to get a lot of hate for it. I'm going to get a lot of people that are going to get mad at me for picking against this team. But the Houston Texans are a 7-point underdog, according to FanDuel, against Las Vegas. Las Vegas Raiders playing at Allegiant Stadium are a whopping 7-point favorite against Houston. But remember that Houston only has one win, Las Vegas only has one win, and Las Vegas hasn't looked dominant in any game they played this year. Houston, outside of the game against LA, have kept it close in almost every game they have played in. So I'm going to say my upset here, give me Houston +7. I have Houston beating Las Vegas. I have the Houston Texans coming to Allegiant Stadium, and they will beat Las Vegas in Las Vegas. So I have the Raiders going to 1-5, and I have Houston going to 2-3-1 on the calendar year. Next matchup is at SoFi Stadium in LA. You have Seattle taking on Los Angeles. And here is my fourth and final upset of the show. I'm going to take Seattle. Give me the +5 on this one. I have Seattle losing by a field goal in this game, which once again would still count. So I have Seattle +5 in this deal because I do not trust Los Angeles. This is an organization that should be deadly, should be dominant, but they have not been dominant at all. So give me Seattle, give me +5 over Los Angeles. A rematch of Super Bowl 55 from 2 years ago. You have Kansas City as a minus 1.5 point favorite taking on San Francisco. Now it's going to be played in Santa Clara. It's going to be played out in San Francisco, and Kansas City being a 1.5 point favorite on the road. Give me Kansas City here, as much as it pains me to say it. Give me Kansas City to go 5-2 on the year. And the 49ers, without Christian McCaffrey yet, will go to 3-4 on the calendar year. The last two matchups, you have Pittsburgh taking on Miami. Give me Miami -7.5 here. I do not trust Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh is going to have one of the worst seasons they have had in their franchise history. Miami will go to 4-3 on the year. Pittsburgh will go to 2-5. And Pittsburgh, if you fire Mike Tomlin, most of the NFL will be happy about it. If you don't fire Mike Tomlin, I will applaud you for it because it's not Mike Tomlin's fault you're going 2-5. It's Matt Canada and his lack of an offensive game plan out in Pittsburgh. And the last game that so many people are going to want me to talk about, Monday Night Football, my Chicago Bears taking on New England Patriots, will be played in Foxborough. Patriots, according to FanDuel, are a 7.5 point favorite against Chicago. And I will gladly take New England. I will take -7.5 because Chicago has one of the worst offenses in football. And I do not trust Chicago to put up more than 20 points in this game. So the Bears will go to 2-5. New England will go to 4-3 on the year. So that is my NFL Week 7 picks. I will do them one more time for everyone watching around the world. So I have Atlanta beating Cincinnati +6.5. Detroit versus Dallas. I will take Detroit +6.5. Tennessee versus Indianapolis. I am taking Tennessee -2.5. Green Bay versus Washington. I will take Green Bay minus 4.5. Tampa Bay versus Carolina. I will take Tampa Bay minus 13.5. New Jersey versus Jacksonville. I have the Jaguars. Give me the field goal on that one. I say they cover. Cleveland versus Baltimore. I will take Baltimore winning by a touchdown. So give me Baltimore minus 6.5. You have the New Jersey Jets taking on the Denver Broncos. Give me New Jersey Jets +1 and them going to 5-2 for the first time in forever. I will take the Houston Texans over Las Vegas Raiders. Give me Houston +7. Seattle, I'm taking over LA. I will take the Seahawks over the Chargers +5. Kansas City will beat San Francisco. Give me the Chiefs -1.5. And I have Miami -7.5 over Pittsburgh and New England -7.5 over Chicago. So we have about 20 minutes left here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media, here on PRConnectionsRadio.com. I also want to give a quick shout out to the sports entertainment capital of the world. I want to very quickly go over a few things that has happened in Las Vegas that I definitely need to talk about to end this show, because I would not give it justice if I did not. And this is actually our Las Vegas sports segment here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. Now, the Las Vegas Aviators, their season came to an end. The AAA championship game was played here at Las Vegas Ballpark. The 2022 AAA World Series was played at Las Vegas Ballpark. The Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio went to the event. We covered the event. Congratulations to the Durham Bulls on winning the championship. A reason why Tampa Bay is not going to fall off is because the Durham Bulls had so many prospects, so much talent at the AAA championship game. It was incredible to see all of the talent that was displayed at the AAA championship game. So once again, I appreciate the Las Vegas Ballpark, Las Vegas Aviators, Durham Bulls, Reno Aces, minor league baseball itself. You put on a fantastic show at the AAA championship game. For basketball, you have the G League Ignite, which is a team out in Henderson, Nevada. They are putting up minor league basketball, or essentially developmental league basketball. It will be at the Henderson, Nevada. And here at the Sports Angle, we are going to go to one of those games. It's going to be a fantastic experience to watch the best up-and-coming stars of the NBA before they get to the NBA. The NFL, Las Vegas Raiders, they are 1-4 on the year. They're going to be 1-5 after Sunday. And there's even been talk about Mark Davis and Josh McDaniels. Been talk about Josh McDaniels potentially being fired by Mark Davis. Now, I want to know from everyone watching around the world, do you believe that Mark Davis would pull the plug on Josh McDaniels 1 year in to his tenure as head coach? Do you believe that the Raiders go 1-5? If the Raiders end up going 5-10, for example, would Josh McDaniels be fired as the Raiders head coach? Or do you see Mark Davis having trust, having confidence, having faith in Josh McDaniels to bring him back moving forward? Because I'm really curious to see from everyone watching around the world, what is your opinion on that? The fact that Josh McDaniels is already on a hot seat. Josh McDaniels is already in the conversation of being fired as a head coach. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go over 5 coaches right now that are on the hot seat in the NFL. First one is Arizona Cardinals' Cliff Kingsbury. Now, Cliff Kingsbury is an interesting topic because the Cardinals are not bad at this point. All right, they are 1 game below 500. They are only 1 game back from the NFC West Division. But it's been obvious that Cliff Kingsbury has lost Arizona's locker room. It is obvious Cliff Kingsbury is not a leader in the locker room. He is not a voice of reason out in Arizona. We saw the confrontation between Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray on the sidelines. It was not pretty. It was not good for the organization. So I say Cliff Kingsbury, he'd be the first one on that list. Second one would be Baltimore Ravens' John Harbaugh. After 14 seasons as the head coach in Baltimore, I will say it on record. If John Harbaugh does not get Baltimore to the NFC Championship game, Baltimore will fire John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh has to essentially have a great season in 2022 in order to save his job. Reason why I say that is because of all the second half leads that have been blown the past 2 seasons. All of the conflict about the defense and how bad Baltimore's defense has regressed with John Harbaugh. So I got Cliff Kingsbury. I got John Harbaugh. Give me Mike McCarthy. Dallas's Mike McCarthy, they will be 5-2 after this week. And if Dallas does not make the playoffs, make no certain about it, Jerry Jones will fire Mike McCarthy and bring in someone new. Jerry Jones does not like losing. Jerry Jones brought in Mike McCarthy because he won a Super Bowl in Green Bay. He brought in Mike McCarthy because he went to multiple NFC Championship games in Green Bay. Jerry Jones has Dan Quinn. Jerry Jones has Kellen Moore. Jerry Jones has Sean Payton. Okay? He has Sean Payton on phone dial. So, am I very certain that if Dallas does not make the playoffs, Mike McCarthy's fired? Abso-freaking-lutely. Number four is very simple. Give me the Green Bay coach. Give me the head coach of Green Bay. I say that Green Bay's head coach could be fired if Green Bay does not do good in 2022. Because Green Bay was supposed to be a lot better than what they are this year. Green Bay is supposed to be better than a subpar 500 team in the NFL. So I will say right here, right now, that if Green Bay misses the playoffs, if Green Bay is a first-round exit, expect someone to get fired in Green Bay. Expect someone to be given their walking papers in Green Bay. And at number 5, I'm going to go with the Houston Texans. Give me Lovie Smith. As much as I like Lovie Smith, as much as he's a Bears legend, as much as he's an Fighting Illinois legend, Lovie Smith is going to have his 1 year in Houston, and then they will hire a coach that will actually be a long-term solution in Houston. Colin Lacy, who we had on the show earlier, he was talking about Dusty Baker and how he could be a stopgap, how he could be a filler as a coach in Houston. A lot of people assumed that when he got hired in 2020. That is what Lovie Smith is with the Houston Texans right now. They hired Lovie Smith to be a 1-year stopgap in Houston, to be a 1-year transitional head coach for the Texans until they find somebody else. Now, my honorable mentions, by the way, I'm going to go with Frank Reich out in Indianapolis. If the Colts finish below 500, he is being fired. I say Josh McDaniels with the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I know there's been rumblings and been conversations about Mark Davis firing Josh McDaniels, but unless they finish 4-13, unless Las Vegas finishes 5-12, I don't see Josh McDaniels being fired. unless Las Vegas has a terrible, one of the worst seasons in all of football. And I'm also going to say Kyle Shanahan is on that list because San Francisco is going to be a playoff team, but on the off chance it doesn't, he's going to get fired. So we have about 5 minutes left here on Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. And I also want to very quickly talk about the new XFL team that's going to be coming here to Las Vegas. The Las Vegas Vipers are going to be joining the XFL, the organization that's being ran by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The XFL, the organization that was founded in 2001 by WWE's Vince McMahon. Now, this is actually interesting because on July 24th, 2022, it was announced that Las Vegas would be getting a team in the XFL. Now, the Vegas Vipers were originally the Tampa Bay Vipers. The Tampa Bay Vipers, who were in the original season for the XFL, have been sent all the way down to Las Vegas, and they are now the Vegas Vipers. Also in the XFL, you had the Orlando Guardians, who came from New York. So the New York Guardians became the Orlando Guardians, and the Tampa Bay Vipers have become the Las Vegas Vipers. By the way, they're saying the Vegas Vipers are a homage to the Rattlesnakes in Las Vegas. Now, this will be the 5th professional football team to have been hosted in Las Vegas. You had the Las Vegas Posse of the Canadian Football League in the early 1990s. You had the Las Vegas Outlaws in the original XFL in 2001. And you had the UFL Las Vegas Locomotives from 2009 to 2012. And of course, you have what they have now today in the Las Vegas Raiders. So the XFL, the Tampa Bay Vipers are now the Las Vegas Vipers. And they announced the coaching staff for the Vegas Vipers. And Baltimore Ravens legend Rod Woodson will be the head coach. That's right, folks. Baltimore Ravens safety Rod Woodson is going to be the head coach for the Vegas Vipers for the XFL. And he also will have Ray Sherman as a offensive for the offense. He's also going to have Chris Dishman, who's going to be a defensive backs coach. You're going to have Jen Welter. You're going to have Darren Perry. There is a lot of talent on the coaching staff for the Vegas Vipers. So it's actually quite fascinating to see all of the talent that have been added by the XFL. And for anyone who wants to know about a crash course about the XFL, I'm going to give it to you in about 2 minutes. The Dallas Renegades are a team that's founded in Dallas. They will be playing at the old ballpark in Texas. The Houston Roughnecks is a team that will be playing at a soccer stadium in Houston, Texas. You have the Vegas Vipers, who once again came from Tampa Bay. You have the Orlando Guardians, who came from New York City. They are actually going to be playing at Camping World Stadium out there in Orlando. You have the St. Louis Battlehawks, one of the best names in all of the XFL. They'll be playing at the old dome, the Edward Jones Dome that used to be in the NFL, the St. Louis Rams. The San Antonio Brahmas, who came from Los Angeles, they are going to be playing at the Alamo Dome. Their head coach is going to be Pittsburgh Steelers legend Hines Ward. So for anyone who's confused by the timeline, Las Vegas used to be Tampa Bay, Orlando used to be New York, and San Antonio used to be Los Angeles. You have the Seattle Sea Dragons, who are going to be playing at Lemon Field, where the Seattle Seahawks play, and the DC Defenders are going to be playing at Audi Field, which is a soccer stadium out in Washington, D.C. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he is the co-owner of it. Russ Brandon is a president of the organization. Doug Whaley is a senior vice president. And you're also going to have their new season next year in 2023. So if we are the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, by the time the XFL gets up and operating, hopefully we can get some time to be down there. Hopefully the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, it will be able to go down to the XFL. We'll be able to watch the Vegas Vipers as they take on the best teams in the XFL. And with about 3 minutes left, I want to give a shout out to the Vegas Golden Knights. 4-1 to start the season. Bruce Cassidy has done a fantastic job for Las Vegas. Henderson Silver Knights out the Dollar Loan Center in Henderson. They've had a slow start to the season, but Caden Korzak and a bunch of good players on that team have been putting up stellar stats. UNLV Rebels, their hockey team has been putting up solid numbers, and I highly recommend going to the Lifeguard Arena out in Henderson and supporting UNLV Rebels hockey. Las Vegas Thunderbirds, they're the junior hockey team out here in Las Vegas. Exceptional talent. Go support junior hockey out in Las Vegas. And lastly, NASCAR weekend, NASCAR playoff weekend here in Las Vegas. The Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, we went out to Las Vegas Motor Speedway. We took photos. We took video. We were out at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. We got to see the Xfinity Series, which is the AAA, and the NASCAR Cup Series, which is the Premier League of NASCAR, compete at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Congratulations to Josh Berry on winning the race there, and congratulations to the winner of the race of the NASCAR Cup Series, which was Joey Logano, who won the race on Sunday at Las Vegas. So I just wanted to very quickly mention that, because if I didn't, I know someone was going to go on my social media at Ian Rakelli 18 or at Sports Angle on PR and was going to mention it. So this has been a fantastic episode of the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. We have another great episode planned for you next week. And until next time, I want everyone to stay safe, watch sports, and go support all of your local college, junior hockey, junior college, grad school, no matter what it is. Go support local sports because they definitely need everyone's support in the community. Go check them out. Until next time, have a good one. This has been the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio.